first look at Apache 4.19, which is the latest release of Apache CloudStack from the Apache CloudStack community. Speaking today is myself, Giles. I'm the CEO and founder of Shape Blue, the CloudStack company. I'm also a PMC member and a committer in Apache CloudStack, and I chair the CloudStack European user group. Marco?
Yes, welcome guys to the webinar. So I am technical manager at Shape Blue and also Apache CloudStack committer. A long time in work with CloudStack. So that's it. Let's go, Giles.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Marco. Okay. What we're going to talk about today, we are going to talk about the actual release of Apache CloudStack 4.19, some information about that. And we're then going to focus on a number of the key new features. Now, to make it clear, we haven't got time to cover all of the new features of Apache CloudStack 4.19. It's a big release. These features are things that Marco and I like and we think are significant and that we've focused on, but there's a lot more to explore around 4.19 than just what we're showing you today. We'll do a live demo of some of those features, and hopefully, time permitting, we'll have time for some questions at the end. So the actual release itself, I mean, we're speaking today. Today's Friday, the 2nd of February, 2024, and literally this morning, the vote concluded and 4.19 is ready for release by the community. As we're speaking, it hasn't officially been released because the announcement hasn't gone out. But I guess by the time anybody sees this, which will probably be something like the 5th of February, 2024, you will have heard that 4.19 has been released. 4.19 has been a massive effort by the whole Apache CloudStack community, people coming from lots of different organizations contributing features. The count we saw was 315 total new features, improvements, and bug fixes. Out of those, 26 specific features. We're going to cover in detail, I think, 8 today. They're just the most significant ones, we think. But there are, as I said earlier, a lot of other features for people to look at. 4.19 is a LTS release, long-term support release from the CloudStack community. So it will be supported by the community for a period of 18 months from its release, which will take us to August, there's a typo there, August 2025, not 2024, just to make that clear. Okay, let's start talking about some of the features. And I think Marco and I both think this is probably the most significant feature. If not that it's the biggest feature in 4.19, it's just the timing of this. This has been in progress for months and months and months. But obviously, I think anybody watching this probably has been following what's going on with Broadcom and VMware, and we can openly share that, you know, the number of people looking to migrate to CloudStack with something like KVM underneath it has gone up exponentially in the last 6 weeks or so since Broadcom made their announcement. And what we've now got in 4.19 is the ability to migrate an instance, a VM, okay, from the VMware hypervisor to KVM. Okay, now that can work in one of 2 ways. As most people I'm sure know, CloudStack can manage through vCenter, it can manage a VMware environment, and you can actually convert directly a managed VMware data center instances in there directly to KVM instances in your CloudStack environment. Or optionally, you can just point it at an external vCenter, give it the config, the credentials you need for that vCenter, and CloudStack will go off and contact that vCenter, bring in the VM and convert it to KVM on the fly. This is a really, really powerful feature. And it's one that a lot of organizations have been crying out for some time. But as I said, you know, with what's going on with VMware in the industry at the moment, the timing is great. The timing's absolutely great for this. We actually look at what it does. It's down, you can see there, we've got the menu command import export instances. That was already there for some existing functionality which let you import external VMware instances. But now you can convert them, including their disks, networks, and any configuration of a VMware VM into a KVM instance in Apache CloudStack. It's an admin-only feature. Theoretically, it could be some things made available to users, but that would be an interesting discussion, I think for service providers and operators to have. It takes existing VMware instances or VMs from an external vCenter, like I mentioned earlier. Behind the scenes, it's using v2v to actually do the conversion. It chooses a host, a KVM host on which to do that conversion, and then goes through all of the steps required to migrate the VM, its disks, its networks, its configurations to KVM. Quite interestingly, for Linux instances, as in the guest OS, they can actually be done whilst they're running. Windows instances we know need to be stopped to run this process. There's a few restrictions. All of this, I believe, is going into the 4.19 documentation. And those restrictions are around the destination KVM hosts that you're aiming for. There's the list of supported distros that the functionality can actually point at. And there's a couple of sort of prerequisites for Ubuntu, sorry. It doesn't install MBD kit, so that needs to be installed by the admin first. And for Windows guests, you need to install the VirtIO drivers prior to using this tool to push KVM instances onto it. Hugely powerful tool, very, very exciting. Okay, in the same area, although I think this was a completely different work done by a different set of people, we've now got the ability to import existing KVM VMs as CloudStack instances. This was sort of always possible, and Marco will nod when I say this, but this was a convoluted process before. You had to create a template based on the machine, and then create an instance based on that template. It was a very convoluted process. You've now got straightforward UI and API functionality to get external KVM instances and bring them under CloudStack's control. It can come in from it can use a number of different sources. The important thing is that the machines end up within KVM clusters in Apache CloudStack. The different places, you can just point it at a remote KVM host, give it its address, give it some credentials, and it will go and find the VM off that host. You can use a QCal2 image from either shared or local storage. Just point it at that image, off you go. And you can also use it, it's a weird one this, to actually get unmanaged instances that are already in a CloudStack KVM cluster. You might have some other instances that are on the side. So lots of different options, very simple UI or accessible by the API. And this, like all of these these migration tools, more than likely people are going to be accessing this via the API, via CloudMonkey. They're going to be batching things up into scripts instead of just using the user interface. And here's an interesting point with this, which is, this is primarily designed people who are using CloudStack environments and they want to, or they're building a new one and they want to bring in existing KVM machines. But what this does open up is the ability for people to start considering using Apache CloudStack basically just as a KVM management layer, not necessarily thinking of it as a cloud layer, but just thinking of it as a virtualization management platform, which is a use case for CloudStack we haven't seen very much in the past. Okay, the next new feature is CloudStack DRS, and the name of this feature is DRS. It doesn't have a longer name, and the reason it doesn't have a longer name is that there is a large virtualization vendor that has a trademark which is related to distributed resource scheduler. So CloudStack isn't allowed to call it that, but CloudStack is allowed to call it DRS. And you've probably guessed what this does. This is about being able to balance instances across your host estate within a cluster or across your entire cloud environment. There's not a lot to see with this. I'll talk you through the configuration options because the whole point of this is it's just something that sits quietly in the background, making sure that your infrastructure, your compute infrastructure, is being used as efficiently as possible. it automatically moves instances between hosts. It relies on the underlying host migration framework, which was already there in CloudStack. It can be set up globally or on a per cluster basis. So if you've got, different sort of hosts, different sort of policies you're requiring at cluster level, you can do that. And it supports two very simple algorithms, okay? Balanced, where it's going to try and balance the workloads, i.e. the instances, as evenly as possible, or as evenly as you specify across all of the hosts in a cluster, or condensed, which is basically the opposite, where it's going to try and squash everything into as fewer hosts as possible. Why would you use those two different ones? Well, balancing is about spreading the load. It's about increasing or reducing contention issues. It's about giving yourself effectively a little bit more distribution from an HA viewpoint. But obviously the downside of balance is you're using more hosts and you're using more power in those hosts. So balanced is what we expect, or what we see with DRS, is what people use most often in production environments. But if you're in a sort of staging or a test dev environment, power consumption, host consumption might be the most important thing, or the ability to concentrate instances so you can do some maintenance on some other hosts. In which case you choose the condensed algorithm, and it's doing the opposite. DRS is running in the background and it's constantly evaluating, based on some metrics, how it can squash as many instances into as fewer hosts as possible. As I say, this runs automatically. There's not a lot to see. There's two main areas. You've got these, I think there's 6 global settings. That's all you need to do to get this running. And then at cluster level, you can go and manually kick off DRS at cluster level. There's a new area of the cluster screen where you can do that. And these settings are basically choose whether you want balanced, imbalanced, whether it's enabled, what intervals it's using, and then some metrics around what amount of imbalance is tolerated, how often you want it to run, that sort of thing. Click enable, off it goes, and it's going off. It's evaluating per cluster level what state things are in against the amount of balance or imbalance you want, and then it will just live migrate machines around the hosts. And it's hypervisor agnostic. It works on any hypervisor that Apache CloudStack can work with. Okay, next major new feature, VNF appliances. This has been long coming. I think many of you have followed in recent releases of CloudStack. There's been a lot going on in the networking space. For those of you who don't know what a VNF is, virtual network function, this is the idea about, rather than using a physical device, you can take a virtualized network appliance, whether it's whatever it is, a router, a firewall, a WAN accelerator, whatever, and deploy that into your CloudStack environment and use the network functions of that. Now, in theory, that's been possible, and a lot of users of CloudStack are basically spinning up instances with a template for some sort of appliance. But then management of those appliances, being able to map the network interfaces for those appliances, being able to get to the admin area of that appliance, and then for service providers, being able to track that people are using those appliances so you can bill for them, has always been a pain, because it's been a bit of a hack to get this working. But 4.19 now has built-in VNF appliance support, and here's some of the use cases. If you're connecting, branch zones, that sort of thing, you might want to use SD-WAN devices to support SD-WAN. WAN optimization. These are all things that the CloudStack virtual router can't do, right? So you need a VNF to do those. And now the point is you can now deploy those VNFs directly in CloudStack using pfSense or MikroTik firewalls, Cisco ASA firewalls. This might be for compliance reasons, right? So you've got a tenant in your cloud for some regulatory reason, has to use a Cisco ASA because they have to tick a box with some government authority. You can now set up a VNF appliance template, Cisco ASA, and users can deploy that in your CloudStack environment. So What this functionality allows people to do is to deploy and configure the VNF appliances in CloudStack. And CloudStack goes off, it configures all of the required network interfaces for the appliance. It also sets up rules that allow you to get through, or your users to get through, to access the admin side of the appliance. Those appliances are based on templates that the admin will create, and in the demo later we'll talk you through how you create those templates and then deploy appliances based on those templates. Usage is all recorded by the CloudStack usage server, so you can bill for usage of these things. And you can do, again, all of this like anything with CloudStack. You can do this through the API or through the UI. On the template side, just a couple of screenshots of specific things. When you create a VNF template, you have a load of extra settings that you don't have in a normal CloudStack template, and that's around the interface management. You can add as many interfaces as the appliance needs, and then you can add key value pairs that get pushed into the appliance, things like the password, the address for the admin interface, that sort of thing. That license information, that's another one that as a service provider you could push in. Okay, right. Another major milestone for CloudStack is CloudStack now supports object storage. And particularly in the service provider space, nearly every service provider we know using CloudStack also wants to deliver object storage to their customers. And traditionally, there's been no integrated way of doing this with CloudStack. People have gone and had to use other solutions. We've had some vendors who have done some sort of UI integration into CloudStack, but we've never had any good integration. And the sort of holy grail really is that people can, in the CloudStack UI and API, they can create buckets, they can add data into those bucket objects into those buckets, read those buckets like they would do in Amazon with S3, and we've now got that with CloudStack 4.19. So what's actually been created is this piece in the middle, which is the CloudStack Object Storage Framework. Because of the concept of CloudStack, of it keeping its scope relatively tight, CloudStack wasn't ever going to provide its own object storage mechanism. So what CloudStack's got here is a framework which allows easy connection of any object storage, any S3 compliant object storage at the back. So we're starting with providers for MinIO. The Ceph provider is being created by one of our good friends in the community as we speak, but we expect, actually I know of some other vendors who are now looking at creating providers. All of that is abstracted from the end user. The end user just goes to CloudStack and sees buckets, adds data to them, reads data from them, deletes files, does whatever they want to do. The fact it's being provided by a third-party object store, that's academic. That's completely abstracted away from the user. So again, it's that framework model, which is very similar to the backup and recovery framework we've had for a few years. CloudStack isn't doing the heavy lift. We let somebody who's got an established product do that, but CloudStack just presents it as one unified API. So as I say, yeah, we've got providers for MinIO and Ceph's in progress. There is also a simulator provider that can be used if anybody's playing around with this and hasn't actually got an object store. There is also an object browser, a UI browser in the CloudStack UI, so you can browse all of the objects in a bucket. Admin configures the actual object storage provider itself, and that technology at the back, MinIO, Ceph, whatever, is doing all of the hard work. So it's doing all of the storage management, the replication, security, backup. CloudStack's just giving people an interface into that. It supports most common features, quotas for buckets, encryption versioning, bucket policy, public, private. That can all be configured through CloudStack, and that then gets backed off to the provider. Couple of screenshots there. So you see over on the left, as well as volumes and volume snapshots in storage, we've now got buckets. This would be a user creating this. They can create a bucket, specify encryption versioning, etc., and off they go. And then We've got an object browser, which would let them drag and drop files in and out of it. Obviously, when they create the bucket, they also get an endpoint or a pre-signed endpoint, so they can actually access it as proper object storage as well. CloudStack snapshot copy. Oh, I can hardly say that, Marco. It's quite a long-winded one, right? This is a weird one because actually there's not a lot to see here, and it's arguably a very minor feature. The reason Marco and I have selected it is because it's a minor feature which actually lets you do some very significant things. And really all this is the ability for CloudStack now, when it takes a snapshot, and that can be any type of snapshot, to automatically copy that to a second zone. Okay, that doesn't sound massive, and it's not a massive piece of functionality, but that does open up all sorts of options for CloudStack around disaster recovery and disaster recovery as a service. In fact, I forget who it was. Somebody did a talk, I think it was Alex at the CloudStack conference in November in Paris, about a solution he had got for disaster recovery as a service using this feature, which was coming at the time. And with a little bit of thinking at both ends in terms of what you do with that snapshot copy, how you would recover from it. This is a very basic disaster recovery as a service solution just by having this snapshot copy. I mean, it's not a lot to see. I mean, that's taking a new snapshot on the left. You've just now got this new option where you can also copy it to a zone. For recurring snapshot, the same, or you can go and press a button and copy an existing snapshot. So you end up with a copy of that snapshot in a second zone, second availability zone. So that's opening up a lot of stuff around disaster recovery as a service. And there's a little bit more detail. I think that diagram will be in the 4.19 documentation about exactly how it's doing that. It's using the secondary storage VM to actually do the heavy shift of the copying. Okay, scheduled instance lifecycle operations. Why we didn't have these earlier, I don't know. But this is, a very simple idea, which is to be able to create a schedule against an instance, or multiple schedules against an instance, and perform some sort of life cycle operation on that schedule. Classic example, I need to reboot all my database servers at midnight after they've been patched. Bang, off you go. Create a schedule, midnight, these servers. At the moment, it supports start, stop, reboot, and then the forced options around all of those. Also opens up ideas around power saving, right? I mean, yes, CloudStack has got auto scaling, and that would really be the way of scaling up and down according to demand. But if you've got demand is happening at specific times of the day, you could do it arguably a more old-fashioned way, which is to set schedules against machines and shut them down at certain times of the day. It's saving power. If you're a consumer of a CloudStack cloud and it's being charged hourly, you're going to save yourself money, right? But yeah, this is just the idea that you can set schedules, multiple schedules against an instance to actually undertake any of those actions. Okay, nearly there with the features that Marco and I have chosen. OAuth 2 authentication, just to make life easier for people. Again, this is a framework. There's an OAuth 2 authentication framework has been created, which would allow any OAuth 2 provider, as long as a provider could be written for it, to be used for authentication in CloudStack. At the moment, there's support for Google and GitHub, I believe, but we're expecting other community members, other users to create some other providers that suit them in the future. Plugins, I say, only for Google and GitHub at the moment. Very, very simple to configure. And you see from the screenshot there, you can now sign in with GitHub. We can sign in with Google. It's worth mentioning, I mean, one of the reasons, I mean, OAuth 2 is obviously a secure authentication mechanism, but one of the drivers for people towards OAuth 2 is bringing in user data at registration at the beginning. So, when you're signing up for something, it's great because it takes all your information from GitHub, from Google or wherever, and brings it in. At the moment, that isn't supported in the CloudStack integration. And the reason that isn't supported is CloudStack does not have self-registration. It hasn't ever, and it doesn't for security reasons. That might be something that changes in the future, in which case the OAuth 2 stuff would quickly evolve to work with that. But because CloudStack has no self sign up, you can't use OAuth 2 for self sign up because there's no concept of self sign up. Okay, they're the features that Marco and I really liked the look of. I think we've gone through about 8 there. We've also got some other ones which didn't, we also really like, but didn't really have time to go through in sort of detail today. And again, I think it's 36 in total. We still haven't got all of them. Just let me highlight some of these. There's a new feature for granular storage management of secondary storage. So you can actually get down to file level on secondary storage to manage that storage through the CloudStack UI and API. You can now shut CloudStack down safely, okay? And it will clear out its queues, clear its jobs, and shut itself down in a graceful way. And I know anybody who supports the CloudStack environment and regularly has to restart services, they'll be thankful of that. We've got a new dashboard. You'll see that straight away when we do the demo. Capsi, which is the CAPI provider for Kubernetes, that's been more tightly integrated with the CloudStack Kubernetes service. So they're now aware of each other. So in the CloudStack Kubernetes service, you can see all of your Kubernetes clusters, not just the ones created through the Kubernetes service. We're now supporting vSphere 8, which is great, although how long we'll need to continue to support VMware for, I don't know. That's anybody's guess at the moment. We've got some new storage providers. The guys over at AT&T, I hope they don't mind me name checking them. I'd like to say thanks. They've contributed support for HP Primera and Pure Flash Array, which is a fantastic storage platform, obviously they're using. So we've now got managed storage for both of those. There's a new, more flexible model for tags for hosts and storage pools. And the store pool guys have created KVM host HA specifically for store pool. And there's more than that list. So, if you've got one action after you've watched this webinar, go away, look at the release notes, go and have a look at the full list of new features, because we certainly haven't covered them all today. Okay, I think it's probably time for a demo. We're working, I think, to using release candidate 3 or release candidate 4, because the official release hasn't actually hit the streets, although it probably has by the time we finish doing this webinar, Marco. And we're going to go through some of the headlines: the VMware to KVM migration, KVM import, VNF appliances, and CloudStack object storage. Over to you, Marco.
Let's start showing the last feature you talk about. It's the OAuth 2 authentication. So let me navigate with as a user to do something inside the CloudStack. So I am already authenticated with GitHub in that case. So in the login page of CloudStack, just click and I am inside of CloudStack, and so I can manage. And now
that's the shortest demo ever, right, Marco?
Easier, no? It's really easier. And so you have here the new UI. It's amazing UI, Giles. Is really, you have all information about your environment consolidated in the dashboard page. So here you have the number of instances and volumes, gas network, compute, storage, everything on that page. Great.
Yeah, that's the user dashboard you've got there, Marco, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and this is the user dashboard. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also I guess when you log on as admin later, we'll see the new admin dashboard as well.
Let me show a feature here. It's as a user, let's object store. It's a very interesting feature. So it's already connected and created the provider here using MiniIO. So let me just create a test one here.
Okay.
And with 1 giga, I will make it public, Giles. Okay. So Alex is talking here. So here I have the bucket. I can browse. So, and upload a file. For example, let me just get a file to put inside there, maybe an image. So, got it?
Yeah.
Here is the image. So, I can add a pair value. And upload. So here I am. And if I navigate to this, I get the link to use as a public. Let me copy this address, open a new, and so it's downloaded here. You know.
That was the pre-signed link you used, right?
Yeah, yes, it's very, very easy to
Yeah.
to use it. And for example, using application or something to user download in the application layer. So it's a really cool feature. So let's talk a little bit about VNF. I think it's an interesting feature you have here. A user will navigate to the network. It has a new option here, is the VNF appliance. So I already have a PF sense created here. I can go to there. And so I have the endpoints to manage directly in the PF sense UI to, for example, go inside and I think
Right.
it's admin. It's PF sense is, I don't remember, it's a password. Maybe it's it. No, password. I forgot the password. By the way,
Very secure, Marco.
CloudStack, I think it is. Yeah, it is. So I can get the control as a user of my own firewall and control it and set up it as I want. For example, if I do some load balancing or some specific rule for the firewall, something else I can control directly on the PF Sense. It's not supported on the PF Sense. For example, going here, if my provider can let it available to me, for example, others like FlexOne and MikroTik and Cisco ASA, F5 Big IP load balancer, and others. It's agnostic of.
And these are templates that the cloud admin has created based on those particular images of those VNFs, right?
Just to show a little bit how it works, for example, you explain in the presentation about the network setup and this stuff that it's set on the template, right?
Yeah.
So you can go here. For example, I want three NICs for this. Let me get another one template. It's a MikroTik here. Okay. So I get these two LANs here because it two LANs. So the one and the LAN number one. Okay.
Yeah.
So here I can select who will be the LAN, my network with the name one, and the LAN.
And that network there that you're choosing, that's just a CloudStack network, right? An L2 network or a shared
related with the network that the VNF appliance needed to be related with the CloudStack network as well. So
all right.
Define a name, firewall 02, and so allows it's like and create a virtual machine. So it's very simple.
Yeah. And what that's doing, so people know, that's going and creating a new instance of the size you specified. It's using the template, but it's then doing these extra bits, which is configuring all of the interfaces as you've specified. It's giving the user the endpoint for administration. And importantly, it's letting service providers bill for usage of that appliance, right?
Exactly. It let the users have is free to select the appliance they need to a specific use case, for example, and use it as a service. Then so we just install and use it and configure as they want. You know, the user no need to not depending of physical appliance to do that or the service provider to do that by themselves. You know, it's a really cool feature as well.
Okay,
So Giles, let's explain a little bit now about some administration stuffs here. I think you have, for example, a nice feature with this advent of Broadcom and VMware. Many users want to an alternative to VMware, right?
correct. Actually,
So,
Marco, I was going to say, before you do, could we have a quick look at the template side of the VNF? Could you,
is interesting. Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Let's
because
navigate here.
you've shown us the user experience, right? Which is very simple, but I guess you need to configure.
Let me take this PF sense here just to show the
Okay.
settings. So the user here now can, for example, select the NICs the VNF needed to have when is created. If you need to add another one, you have a specific window here to do that. And also, so you can, for example, set the method to access the endpoint, the port, the vendor, the version, what is the default web password and web user. Not only that, about the password, for example, you can select, you can also inform the users the SSG password,
Yeah.
also the user, the SSG user, for example, to it's just to show to the user the default information, the default credential, the instance is ready to the instance the VNF appliance created,
Get
you'll
it.
be set. That's it.
And then creating a new template similar to creating an
It's
existing.
a, it's a very similar, Giles. So you can see it's like a registering a template.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
unique difference here is selected VNF, so as a template type.
Okay. And if you do that, it then gives you all the options for the network interface and the parameters that are going
Yeah.
in.
Once it's created, you go to the template and so set the information you want about the VNF.
Get it?
Well, let's go to the this is a previously you have the VMware injection, Giles, where it's possible to get a vSphere cluster injected inside CloudStack. So now the community extended this functionality for other interesting things, basically related with Broadcom. The community get this. There is a many user wanted to migrate from VMware to other platforms. So in CloudStack now it's a very strong platform to help users that needed to reduce these costs related with VMware. So the VMware you continue using, for example, you have the manage existing instance like before.
That functionality has been there for years anyway. That's the ability to bring in from an existing vCenter, right?
Yeah. When I select, for example, VMware, I can also now migrate existing instance, VMware instance to KVM.
Yeah.
So we have two options here. For example, if I have a cluster configured, registered in CloudStack, I can select existing cluster here. And so I can select the zone,
Yeah.
the data center, and
Yeah.
ask to list the instance. So
Okay.
the instance will be here.
So they're instances that are already managed by CloudStack. It's already controlling the vCenter, but you're going to change the hypervisor type of those instances from VMware to KVM, right?
Exactly. In the user case, in this scenario, for example, exactly to get VMware virtual machine and convert it in a KVM virtual machine. I think it's a really interesting feature for the user. Also, it's possible to manage, for example, if I don't have the vSphere connected with CloudStack, it's not managed, the cluster is not managed by CloudStack. So you need to just insert the credentials here, the VMware vCenter host. You have a typo here, but you need to fix it after. So the vCenter data center, the username, password, and then connect and list. So it's very easy.
So
Let me go
basically,
back.
any VMware VM that's in a vCenter, we
Yeah,
can,
yes.
whether it's in CloudStack or external to CloudStack, we can point at it, get the VM, convert it to KVM, and it goes into a KVM cluster.
Yeah. It's a very interesting feature. Here, for example, I have some instance, VMware instance running, and on this cluster here I select, okay? So let me get this first one here is a Rock Linux 64. Oh, let's get the Microsoft Windows here. Import. It's important message here. Running Windows VM need to be
I mentioned that before.
Yeah. Let me get this power on Rock Linux here. So it's important to say, Giles, first, a warning here. It's if you want to convert a VMware virtual machine into a KVM instance, it's better to do that with powered off instance, okay? But the Linux, you can do it, but the time will be longer than I stopped virtual instance, okay?
So it's possible, but maybe not recommended, and will take longer.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's possible, but it's not recommended, exactly. For example, let me define a name here for this instance. This field here, it's the display name you're showing into the cloud stack. You have another type of here. It's not a host name. It's the instance host name. So you'll be fixed after. You can define the VMware, the instance host name here to be registered in internal DNS. Also, also it's possible to select a domain and a project and account. It's a multi-tenant platform. You need to do this stuff as well. Also, you have two options here to select a KVM host cluster to perform the conversion. So I have two hosts in this cluster. So, but if you don't select this, you'll be randomic to do
Random.
that.
Okay.
Random. Yeah, exactly.
So that's the host. That's not the destination host. That's the host that's actually going to do
We will perform the process using virt v2v.
Yeah, which is, I guess, pretty CPU intensive.
Yeah, exactly, because you needed to do a lot of conversion, etc., memory intensive usage as well, etc. This second options here is to select where you want to use as a temporary store of the copy. You can select the second storage or primary storage. So if you select, for example, primary storage, you have a list here. And if you select the second, you'll be using the default secondary storage one. If you don't select anything, you'll be using the secondary storage to do that. Okay. So as this VM is power on, and you have 512 megabits of memory. So it's important to say that as the VM will be converted into a KVM, I can select any computer offering, but it's important to check about the capacity, the intensive, how much intensive memory, for example, the application you have running inside the VM you need. So it's important to take attention on this detail. Okay, so let me select this one. And so there is another option about a network, allow duplicate MAC address. You can maintain the same MAC address you are using in the VMware instance. But it's important, for example, for application that requires, the license requires the MAC address to run. For example, or some entry in the DNS, something like that.
I'm guessing it's going to be pretty dangerous if you if you use it, you don't need it. That's why it's off by default, right?
At the end, you have here the network. By default, select the network the VM is running. So, or you can select another one you want, and launch it. In background, the process to convert.
Yeah. Now I've seen this running, and I know this webinar is going to be finished by the time that will be converted. It's not an instant process, right? It's on the side of the machine.
It's not an instant process, exactly.
Yeah, good.
In the same page here, Giles, about import and export instance, you have KVM. So what can I do? It's very similar to the VMware process, but it's more extensible. For example, I already have my KVM cluster configured into CloudStack. So in that case, I just select the zone, the pod, the cluster, and so I have the list of instance not managed by CloudStack and the manager as well. I can select, for example, this one to manage.
So Marco, let's just make that clear to me because I understand this. So this is, you've got a KVM cluster in CloudStack that's got whatever you've got there, 6 machines in it, 6 instances, but you've also got one that is an independent KVM instance, nothing to do with CloudStack, and all you're doing here is pulling that into CloudStack. Is that correct?
And there is many options here, Giles. The first options is manage existing instance into CloudStack.
Yeah.
You already have, for example, the cluster, KVM cluster configured inside CloudStack, and then you can manage the instance. The second option is, a mistake.
There you go. The danger of using MAC address, the same MAC address, right?
Exactly that, yeah. Importing instance from remote KVM. That's the point you want to explain, right, Giles? You need to define the host here, the username, root, for example, the password, and where will be the temporary path to store the keycode file in the target host in that case. And then you select here which zone you want to import the instance.
Yeah, okay. So that's where you've got just a KVM host, nothing to do with CloudStack.
Nothing related with VMware.
You want to go and get an instance. That's why you need credentials there, because CloudStack doesn't know. Yeah, bang, bring it into CloudStack. Okay, get that.
Other option is, for example, if you have some cluster configured in your CloudStack, you can import keycode2 image from the local storage disk, for example. But you have also you can also select it from the shared storage, for example, and select the disk you want and import the instance from the file. Okay. It's a nice feature, right?
Great features. Some great.
Yeah.
Good. Is there anything else you were going to demo today, Marco?
I think you cover everything. Maybe a snapshot copy. It's a very easy. I think it's a simple feature you have. For example, when you select something, take instant, you can select, for example, the volume, and it's a snapshot. Instance volume snapshot. This one. No, it's not here, Giles. Sorry. Instance snapshot instance. In storage, volumes, take a snapshot. Yes, here. You define a name and you can select it. The snapshot will be always created in the active zone, and then you can select the additional one. It's very simple, you know.
Yeah, it's very simple, but you know, I mentioned this when I was talking through the slides, what Alex had done with that, which is some work he was doing with a customer, I think, which was around the idea that you can then put some scripting around the end of that to actually use that as the foundation of disaster recovery as a service. So it's a simple feature that enables a lot of other stuff.
The interesting part in here in the disaster recovery scenario, for example, the user can define their policies. No need to be rigid policies that from the vendor, for example. Yeah,
I get it. Thank you very much. We have a few questions. I think probably best we won't take those because we needed to keep this down to time. So we'll follow up with some questions on a blog or something like that. Thank you, people, for listening to this today. Thank you, Marco, for the demos. Look out for CloudStack 4.19 release announcements, which will be next week. Download the release notes so you know what's there. And we look forward to speaking to you all about your experiences with 4.19. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, guys.